In the biting cold of 1942, a new and brutal front opened in the Second World War, not on land, but on the unforgiving waters of the Arctic Ocean. This is the story of the Arctic Convoys, a lifeline stretched thin between the Allies and the Soviet Union, and one of the most perilous journeys of the entire war. Imagine this. You're on the deck of a merchant ship, laden with tanks, planes, and vital supplies. The air is so cold it burns your lungs. Ice coats every surface, making the deck a treacherous skating rink. All around you, the sea is a churning gray expanse, and somewhere beneath those waves, or hidden in the stormy skies, the enemy is waiting. This was the reality for tens of thousands of sailors. Why take such a risk? Because in 1942, the Soviet Union was locked in a desperate struggle on the Eastern Front. These convoys, codenamed with letters like PQ and QP, were Churchill's answer to Stalin's plea for help. They carried everything from raw materials to munitions, essential for keeping the Soviet war effort alive. It was a strategic imperative, a testament to an alliance forged in the crucible of war. But the journey was hell on earth. The route snaked north from Iceland or Scotland, rounding the top of Nazi-occupied Norway to reach the Soviet ports of Murmansk and Arkhangelsk. This path took them directly through a gauntlet of German U-boats, long-range bombers, and powerful warships like the Tirpitz, lurking in the Norwegian fjords. The sailors weren't just battling the enemy, they were battling the Arctic itself. Monstrous waves could toss ships like toys. Pack ice threatened to crush hulls. And for much of the year, the near-constant daylight of the midnight sun offered no darkness to hide in. In winter, the opposite was true. Perpetual darkness and blizzards that could swallow a ship whole. One of the most infamous convoys was PQ-17 in the summer of 1942. Acting on flawed intelligence that German heavy warships were about to attack, the British Admiralty gave an unthinkable order. Convoy is to scatter. This left the slow, vulnerable merchant ships to fend for themselves. The result was a catastrophe. U-boats and aircraft picked them off one by one. Of the 35 merchant ships that started, only 11 made it to Russia. It was a devastating loss of men, ships, and cargo. Yet, despite the horrors of PQ-17, the convoys continued. The sailors' men from Britain, the United States, Canada, and many other allied nations showed incredible resilience. They knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake. They were ordinary people, fishermen, dock workers, young men seeking adventure thrust into an extraordinary and lethal theater of war. Their courage was matched by the naval escorts, the destroyers, corvettes, and cruisers that formed the protective ring around the precious cargo. Their battles against submarines and aircraft were relentless, fought in freezing conditions with frozen equipment and exhausted crews. Every depth charge dropped, every anti-aircraft shell fired was a defiance against both the enemy and the elements. The Arctic convoys were more than just a supply line. They were a symbol of Allied determination and a crucial, though often overlooked, contribution to the final victory. The bravery of the sailors who sailed into the frozen teeth of the Arctic is a legacy of endurance and sacrifice that should never be forgotten.